firstly, regarding these two decisions over the summer of the Constitutional Court, one concerning the President's and the nomination of the Prime Minister, as well as the election of the Speaker of Parliament, what's your take on those decisions?
I think it's important when you look at the Constitution in Kosovo, one of the primary ideas behind it was to make sure that there was an ability to create a functioning government at all times and to try to stay away from long stalemates that would impact the ability of a government to act on behalf of the country. I mean, that was a primary concern of the drafting committee, and certainly those of us who worked with them on the draft, was to create a procedure for ensuring that the Constitution was functional and that it would result in a fully functioning government in a short period of time, and we'd stay away from long stalemates which were plaguing other countries in the region at the time. And so, I mean, I think a constitution needs to be read in that vein, and particularly the power of the president to act in the best interests of the country to ensure that there is a functioning government. I probably would have preferred a slightly different reading of the Constitution, but it's hard to argue that the Constitutional Court is wrong because they have given a reasoned decision, and they're the court that needs to make the decision as to what the Constitution means. So to the extent that the decisions result in or could result in a stalemate, they may not, of course, could result in a stalemate, then I think it's important to look at the entire meaning behind the Constitution, which is to create a functioning government just as quickly as possible. So I do think that the president has considerable authority to appoint a candidate for prime minister who can achieve a majority vote in the assembly. This is a parliamentary system, and a parliamentary system cannot act without a majority of the members of the parliament. It simply cannot function with a minority government that does not have a coalition partner with it in a real sense of creating a government. So, I think the president does have significant authority to ensure that a government can be formed, and that has to be done at some point in time in the process. I don't know that I see anything inconsistent about the first decision there. On the second decision, I think pretty clearly if you can form a parliamentary group that has a majority, then that parliamentary group can elect the assembly speaker. I'm not sure an assembly can act without a leader. And there again lies the problem with the second decision, that it really focuses on a process that perhaps is not attainable.
Yeah, what you had mentioned earlier is that the intention of the Constitution was to ensure that stable governments could be formed quickly. And one of the criticisms of both these decisions is that they've actually done quite the opposite. In essence, creating the ability for the outgoing ruling party, the PDK, to stall the process indefinitely. Especially with the last decision, which created essentially no alternative but to have them nominate the Speaker of Parliament. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think any constitution should be read, unless it is absolutely inconsistent with that prospect, should be read in a way that allows a government to function. A central government is so vitally important to any country. It's vitally important to Kosovo, not only for now but for the future. And any decision that causes delays in that process and really relies on goodwill among political opponents to try to reach an acceptable result is something that is going to cause problems. So, I think that, particularly Judge Carolyn's dissent, which really focused on a much more practical approach, and a much more practical reading of the term parliamentary group, in my view, is correct. But the majority of the Constitutional Court decided otherwise, so since that is the court that has the authority to determine what the Constitution means under the language of the Constitution, that's really the decision that the country has to live with. So given those parameters, I think it's important for the president to step in and make sure that a functioning government can be created.
As someone who helped draft the Constitution, I'm curious, how would you define the term biggest parliamentary group?
Well, I think a parliamentary group is a group that is able to work together in Parliament. It doesn't refer to a political party. It doesn't refer to a political coalition. Those are terms defined in the law. And a parliamentary group really is a group that works together within the Parliament, in my view. But, again, the Constitutional Court has interpreted that word differently in light of their understanding of parties and coalitions and the requirement of registration. My own view is that a parliamentary group would be a group within the Assembly.
Just a similar question concerning the first decision. How do you define a majority?
Well, I think I'm stepping back now to the process as it was designed originally, and that is that a party or a coalition registered during the election that receives the majority, the most votes of any of the parties or coalitions registered before the election, would have the first opportunity to propose a prime minister and a government. But you can't have a prime minister and a government that doesn't command a majority of a parliamentary body. It's not possible, because you're going to be faced constantly with the threat of a no-confidence vote. You're not going to be able to elect a government. You're not going to be able to do all the things that a parliamentary government needs to do. So I think the way the Constitution was envisioned is a majority party or a majority coalition, if they were under 50%, would then have to combine with other groups in order to reach that majority. And that's what's done in parliamentary democracies all the time. If they couldn't reach that majority, then it is left to the discretion, the good discretion of a president who is acting in the best interests of the country to propose another candidate, presumably a candidate that can then achieve a majority vote and create a government. If there isn't another party or coalition or a group within the parliament that can do that, then the only other alternative is new elections to try to clarify this issue. But it just seems to me that the only way in a parliamentary democracy that you can create a majority when you don't have one political party getting a majority is a group banding together, and whether you call it a coalition or a group or perhaps a governing coalition, whatever you want to call it, you have to reach that kind of a group before you can have a majority and be able to establish a parliamentary government. And I think that's where getting caught up on the semantics here, the meaning of the words is secondary, in my view, to allowing groups that are willing to work together to create a government to try to reach the majority. And if a majority, a party receiving the majority in the election can do that with coalition partners, great. That's the way the system is supposed to work. If they can't, then someone else has to do it, because otherwise you're not going to be able to govern.
Well, Judge, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It really was a pleasure.